Yo, what's up YouTube? It's Yoshi here. So today we're going to be focusing on the Yoshi matchup for Reina. We're going to be mostly going over what tools we should be best utilizing and what to generally expect whenever approaching this very difficult matchup. And because this is Reina specific, we won't be covering everything that Yoshi can do, but rather focus on what specifically gives us the most trouble and how we can best use that to our advantage. So we're going to start off with Flash, right? So the biggest contender of what this move can do specifically to us as the approachers is mainly comes from our main approach tool, right? 442. So as you guys may know, if we attempt to do most of our options from 442, almost all of it is vulnerable to losing to Flash, as you can see right there, except for our armor move. So this is already our first option if we want to hard commit to an option from Zen from 442. But if we do any other option like the low, if you want to do it for the overhead mid, that's also not going to work. So it's either just do 442 empty, bait out the Flash, and then punish it accordingly. Or if you want to hard commit to an option, then the armor is also there, right? This also happens if you do an empty spin. You are still vulnerable to getting Flash there as well, so don't try to hard commit to the spin. Especially when the Yoshi player is like doing a good enough job to actually react to it. So be careful with that. This also applies from other Zen options as well. So one of them being 423. So from 423, as you can see, the armor loses. Pretty much every single option that we have can lose. Even from the low. So if you ever think about going to if you ever think of going from Sentai from 423, then the same also applies from there. Now from down forward 1, we do have we do have access to the armor option from there as well. But any other option will also lose. So mainly what our approach should be like around like 442 gimmicks all day is that you want to bait out the Flash all the time. So that once you're playing this mind game of them doing a Flash or not, it becomes more like reliable for us to, first of all, go for our hit confirmable Zen armor option, because we can't hit confirm this, by the way. So we can visually see if this move came out or not. Then afterwards, we can confirm the QCF2 will follow up afterwards. If not, then just, minus 14 is not the end of the world. It's like the least risky of our options. So it shouldn't be too bad. Now, the next thing we also wanted to cover is our health sweep options. So that's how most of our Sentai options interacts. But when it comes to health sweep specifically, we have sort of more options to work with. So first of all, if we go for Heaven's Wrath 2, that will not work, because as you can see, the Flash will work there. Same thing if we go for our... Sorry, not that one. Same thing if we go for Heaven's Wrath +4 at the wall. So 3 +4 at the wall can lose to Flash, so that is more of a range issue. But in the open, Heaven's Wrath +4 becomes a reliable option, as you can see right there. So we gotta take account for whether or not we're at the wall or not, in terms of knowing what our best options are. Generally, for the most part, I personally like to approach with our Heaven's Wrath high options mostly. So this is sort of my go-to check tool against Flash, because as you can see, we get a full counter hit there. And if we're confirming it fast enough, we can get that whole follow-up with Zen 1+2 there, which is pretty powerful. But if you want to play a little bit safe, don't want to guess on too many options, then at that point, Heaven's Wrath +4 can be your best friend. Now, you also can do the low from this, but as you can see, you don't get a counter hit from that. So honestly, the risk is just not worth it, because on block, this low is pretty much death on block. Now, there is some mind game off of it. I do understand, but it's just not worth the risk. Now, I wish Flash was the least of our worries from this matchup, but unfortunately, Yoshi has a lot more to offer than that, right? So besides Flash, there's also the idea of dealing with Hopknees. So Hopknee, because of its evasion, can go under a lot of our options, meaning that you don't want to always commit to the Heaven's Wrath high, depending on what their response is looking like. You need to start adapting to what they're more likely to throw out. So how we do this is mainly just essentially whenever we do health sweep, right? Whenever you enter the stance at your health sweep, you sort of just want to cancel it just to sort of study what the responses are looking like. So if they're representing Flash, then at that point you just want to bait it out. And at that point you want to just see what the response is looking like. So at that point he did Hopknee. And at that point I can probably just bait it out and get a full punish if I just don't mess up the input there. So you can do that. Even do a side step if you want. I messed up the input there though. But for the most part, you want to just play it safe. So, see what the response is like. And fade out accordingly, and then get your reward. Here's another thing though. So flash by itself is 6 frames, right? But whenever he has access to heat, or rather just has his sword out, rather having his sword in, whenever he's in no sword stance. So the properties of his flash changes. And the easiest way for us to see this is if we just turn his heat on. So whenever Yoshimitsu has heat turned on, he pretty much has access to all of his no sword properties. And what that looks like is that his flash becomes 8 frames instead of 6 frames, but he also receives a major buff to his flash as well. Because regular flash, if you get hit by it, it's only plus 14, or rather plus 15, but the only thing he gets is back D2. Whereas if he's in heat, and you go for the same option, at that point, you end up getting a full launcher. So it's something that you desperately need to look out for. But in the same time, his options also change for us. So besides our health tip options, right, there's also other ways to access our Heaven's Wrath stance. And one of them is also, us accessing it from running 4, right? Or even like Heat Smash or whatever, like, something that leaves us very, very plus versus Yoshi. So in this case, it could be running 4, that leaves us a plus 8 into Heaven's Wrath stance. And in this case, if we know he has his sword out, or rather has heat turned on, then at that point, our Heaven's Wrath 2 will not lose the flash. See that? Now, this only applies if he's in 2 situations, right? If heat is turned on, or if we specifically have the sword like tucked in. And this is what that looks like. Just for a visual reference. So this is what the no sword stance looks like, and this is sort of the thing that we should be looking out for. And that's sort of like what dictates what sort of options we should be approaching, especially when we want to go for something big, right? So that will cover most of his flash versus no sword flash options. It's just knowing like at what frame you should be challenging, what frame you should not be challenging. So just to keep it basic, whenever he has the sword out, don't bother doing Heaven's Wrath 2 there. As you can see, we do eat that follow-up. But whenever he has the sword out, or if he has heat turned on, which also activates no sword properties, and at that point, Heaven's Wrath 2 becomes a viable option because of those 2 frames being slower. So that's really, really powerful for us. So that basically covers most of our flash options. End of the day, it's still going to be an option that we got to play around all day. It's still going to give us a lot of trouble, but it does help to understand when and when not to like approach, and like knowing what options work in what situations versus like no sword flash versus regular flash, etc., etc. Now, next thing I want to cover is 1-1. So Yoshi 1-1 is kind of problematic, but not in the sense that you may think of. Generally, when it comes to like 4-4-2 approaches, for example, like most Yoshis might do 1-1 as a response. Sorry, I did the wrong recording there. So some of them might do 1-1 as a response. That will like trade with our Sen 3, but also will beat Sen 2, Sen 1+2 as well. This is what typical anti-Reina looks like, right? But this becomes pretty problematic whenever we start to do our armor option, but not from 4-4-2 or from down forward 1, but rather from forward 2-3. So you guys remember earlier when I talked about 4-2-3 and how like the flash beats every single option that we have. This won't be the case when we do it against like his jab checks or like whatever Hopknee he's doing. If he's not doing flash after 4-2-3 Sensei, then we do have more options. But as you can see, 4-2-3 into 10 armor does not interact properly, unfortunately. So this does give the Yoshi player a huge advantage. And if he has the no sword out, or rather if he has heat turned on, this is what that interaction looks like. He gets a full launcher off of that. This does not happen if you do it from 4-4-2, as you can see the armor absorbs properly, or if you do it from down forward 1. It'll absorb it properly. But if you ever decide to go into Sentai from 4-2-3, And do keep in mind that 1-1 is a huge problem for us in that regard. So honestly, I would honestly just steer away from doing any 4-2-3 Sentai option. There's just way too many risks that are not in our favor. I'd rather you just go into 4-2 into Onsoku and then just play around that. Now, another thing that we can also abuse from 1-1 is also being able to parry the second hit. So if you ever if you ever expect them to just spam a 1-1 option at a certain sequence, for example, let's say that they're always representing a 1-1 after our 4-4-2 option, right? If you have a good read on that, you are able to parry the second hit on reaction with her back 2+4 parry. And in that case, you can get a full launcher in that regard. Especially when you have heat on, right? So it is something worth baiting out. Getting a full launch off of it, which is really, really rewarding. And it is something you can do on reaction as well. So even though the string by itself, it is safe, we can play around that and still get some pretty major damage on that. So yeah, that's just a little interaction that we got to worry about when it comes to 1-1. So the next issues that we're going to be talking about here is pretty annoying, and that is mainly around spin. So spin can be quite problematic as well, because whenever we go for our options besides our homing options, this can mainly like be almost every single option we have off of Sentai. So that is something, a response you can showcase, but there's also the idea of doing it from the hell sweep, right? So if you remember earlier, we talked about Heaven's Wrath 3+4 being an option versus flash, right? It can still beat out our like 3+4 options there as well. We can also beat out our mids. We can also beat out our lows as well. So you got to be careful with that. The homing grab is also not in range, unfortunately. So your best bet against this is just to go for the homing high. That is honestly your best bet. But that's, that's also putting yourself at risk in case they go for like a Hopknee, etc., etc. This is sort of where like the whole RPS situation falls into play, right? It's like, okay, you can do option A or B, but then Yoshi could also do option C. This is sort of where the difficulty shows, right? Yoshi pretty much has an answer for everything that we may come at him with, so it's a matter of us just making the correct read. And this also happens from other situations as well, which I will be covering. So the biggest problem the spin offers to us, in my opinion, is whenever we go for our backturn catches versus Yoshi specifically. And what that looks like is generally whenever you catch him in a situation where he ends up backturn. So whenever we catch Yoshi in the backturn situation, generally what our punish would look like is 4-2, 7-1+2. But as you can see, characters like Yoshi have a unique escape way of avoiding this whole mix-up. And instead, what our mix-up option should look like, instead of going for a 10-1+2, is generally either baiting out the flash and then running up and doing our backturn grab, or we can go for our homing option. This will also be the spin option. But here's where we return back to the good old reliable RPS situation. If you're playing a Yoshi player enough times and they are more familiar with that option being spammed, this is a duckable option that they are able to represent. So if you're hard committing to this option all the time, and the Yoshi player picks up on that, they can just duck you and launch you for that, because this is actually not a real option. So this is sort of a thing that we got to worry about. It's not something you can always just do all day. If you really want to play it safe, you can just do the 4-2-3 send 2. But even that can still get spinned on. So you can see the problem there. So this is also dictated by the spin direction, by the way. So if they spin to the opposite side of this, then for some reason, 7-1+2 sort of like, they sort of spin back into our 7-1+2 if they ever spin right, instead of spinning left, which is pretty goofy. So that is a thing that we got to also pay attention to, is what side they're spinning to as well, because that also dictates some options that we have as well. It also affects our backturn grab situation. So let's say you want to style on them, right? Let's say you have the hardest read on them spinning after your 4-2-3, and you want to go for a backturn grab, right? Now notice how our unbreakable grab had just become a side throw at that point. I don't know what exactly causes this, but for some reason, if Yoshimitsu decides to spin to our left side, his right, our left, for some reason our unbreakable grabs becomes a side throw instead of a backturn grab. And at that point, we don't get our all of our damage, but not only that, the throw becomes breakable as well. So if you see that I actually have the throw escape turned on there, they are able to skip that grab. Now, this does not happen if they spin to the other direction. So if we make him go the other direction, and at that point, our back turn grab becomes an actual grab. So I'm not sure why this is a reoccurring issue, but it has happened to me a few times in game. I honestly could not explain to you why. Even like inspecting it in like photo mode, like whenever I saw like, whenever you like genuinely like look at how like the animation of like the Reina like grabbing him, it looks like she's grabbing him back turn, but then turns out it becomes a side throw. I don't know why. This might be a bug. This might be intentional. I could not tell you. As a result, your best back turn punishes, instead of going for our good old reliable 4-2-3 ender, is actually going for, if you ever have a right read on it, right? This is pretty hard to land, but if you can land this, then this is our most consistent option, which is the back 1-1 string. Now notice how Yoshi cannot spin out of this. This, you know, the spin is still turned on, as you can see right there. But if you ever go for our back 1-1, he cannot escape this. So this will give us some pretty big damage, as you can see right there. That giving us almost half life off of a back turn punish, which is really strong. But landing back one itself is still pretty hard. So if you ever have the hardest read on this, then yes, this becomes a really good option. But like I mentioned, it's still pretty difficult to land. So whenever you do manage to land this successfully, then you know the reward can be really high. Now another issue that this character also gives us in terms of back turn punishment as well is for some reason our jab string, which is normally consistent versus the majority of the cast. For some reason, this only happens to both Yoshimitsu and Lee, but our full jab string tends to whiff on them for some reason. So as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't even like interact with Yoshi's back. I don't know what it is, but if you're off axis, the whole thing works. But whenever you're like on axis, first of all, that string doesn't become natural, but then second of all, as you can see, the second hit just not interacting properly with his back. And this only happens to two characters, like I mentioned. This only happens to both Yoshi and Lee. I've tested this string against the majority of the cast, and it doesn't happen to them at all. So I have no idea why this is happening, but it is what it is. So if you want to go for consistency and just want to go for the easiest punish, then 4-4-2, 7-1+2 can be really reliable. Same thing with 4-4-2-3. So you can't fish for the biggest damage, but you know, if you want to go for something more safe and less risky, then that is your option. The same thing can be said about 2-2-2 QCF2 as well. This can whiff sometimes due to the angle and like the walls, how awkward things can interact sometimes. Like the third hit of that string can just straight up whiff, but they cannot spin out of that. So if you do manage to land 2-2-2 as well, and it's not like interacting weirdly, then that is also an answer for you as well. Now, in order for us to also cover other potential backturn options, so because I wanted to cover that earlier, that also gives us an idea of what our backturn punishment should look like in case of situations like this. So whenever they go for an option that might go into like a Kin Parry bait, for example, because you know this can be like a really quick frame startup, which can end up backturn for some reason. But if you do have the right read on this, like you could go for the down for 1-1 string here and end up with a backturn 4 into a full punish, which can also give you some pretty big reward. Or if you're really like, you know, if you're really like accurate about it, right? Like let's say you have the hardest read ever. Then at that point, you could go for something like this, which can lead to some pretty big damage, as you can see right there. So if you do like a simple down for 1 check, you can just walk behind Yoshi's back and get all of that. If you ever like know exactly when he tends to Kin Parry. That's sort of where the back 1 string can also come alive as well. All right, so next option we wanted to cover is his 4-4-4. So he has two situations. He has two ways to access this move, but they generally have the same frame situation. But what that looks like is that generally he just goes into like this full-on launcher that's safe on block, but he can go into multiple options off of it, right? So one of them being spin. So whenever he does 4-4-4 into spin, for example, generally what you want to do is either two things. You either want to do like a quick safe mid check, which can not really lose too much, but on a hard read, you want to go for like a full-on throw. Because our generic throws are homing, it doesn't really matter what side he spins to. Our throw will pretty much track him from both sides. But he can bait this out, as you can see, which is why I want to go for our mid check sometimes, because you don't want to always spam the throw. So we go for that in terms of, you know, him like having a hard read on our grab. He can do that. That's why we do the mid check, because at that point we can do our float. and not really worry about much. But, you know, once again, there is still an answer that Yoshi has, which is, sorry, this is also the low. So if it goes for like the low, this will also beat out our home and grab, which is why you want to go for down forward ones. Now, this will also beat out the backturn flash attempt as well. So some people might go for a backturn flash in this situation if they're just being super crazy about it. And if you go for a very slow mid, for example, in this situation, then back two can also, you know, you can just straight up lose. But some people might opt in for back two because that will cover most of your options as well. So it will cover the mids. It will also cover the spin option as well. And will also be fast enough to beat the low. But, you know, if they do have a hard read on that and they know about flash, then that is also an option they can do. So that's why mid checks are just probably our safest bet with down forward ones. If not, if you really want to worry about spin, then at that point you can also go for the grab. Now, this is going to be the last situation we're going to be covering, which is essentially Yoshimitsu is probably his most broken wall combo in the game, which essentially looks like this. So whenever you get hit by this wall combo, and if you ever like end up tech rolling, sorry, let me do this again. If you ever end up in this loop situation, you end up tech rolling, you end up eating that full unblockable streak. So that gives him a full launcher. Even if you tech roll on either side, you can't really do anything about it. You can't rage art, you can't armor, you can't Hopknee, you can't do anything much, right? Except for Reina though. Reina actually has a unique way of escaping this, which is actually really abusable for us and actually really good for us. So this was found by Yinkersit on Twitter. But if you do tech roll into a wall sitting 3+4, that can beat the sword sweep, which essentially means that we are able to escape this loop situation and not actually have to like wake up and guess on whether or not he's gonna go for a sword sweep or go for a looping for 1+2, because, you know, this will loop you on the floor in case you end up staying on the ground, in case you don't want to like guess. So we are actually able to escape this with our wall sitting 3+4. So this is something we can definitely use as well. Then we are able to get a full-on 4-4-2-3, which is really, really powerful. But yeah, that essentially covers most of our options against Yoshimitsu. Now, there's a lot more to uncover with this character, but today's going to be just more of a specific technical video that, you know, just to have more, like, more, I guess, an understanding of what our options can look like, and just knowing what our options are versus no swords at sands versus regular sword sands for flash. Knowing how to deal with 1-1, for example, and like what sort of situation we're able to be put in. And of course, as I mentioned, also the spin directions. And the most important thing of them all was that stupid wall combo that we always get looped in. Yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this type of videos. I am still new to recording these type of sort of, I guess, tutorial videos, but I am trying to get better at it. But you know, it's still a work in progress. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed, please don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and do leave some feedback in the comments. I am trying to improve these videos as much as I can. But yeah, on that note, have a good one. Peace.